I get to okay. It is now recording. So we need to pray real fast before we get started. Is there anyone that would like to pray? I can pray. Okay, thanks, JP.
Dear Lord, I thank you for giving us this time. We can meet together and read your word and study it. Pray that we would learn from it and apply it to our lives. Pray that you would just help us to always be seeking you in everything that we're doing. And I pray that we would be lights for you wherever we go. I pray that you would just be with each of our families. Just bless us. And just help us to make an impact in families and churches and the communities that we're in each and every day. That you would just open up our eyes to see your truth. In Jesus' name, I pray.
Amen.
Amen.
All right, so today we will be reading Mark verses 32 through 52.
In chapter 14.
Yes, I totally forgot what chapter. Yeah, 14. 32 to 52. So that's what, 21 verses?
Mm-hmm.
There's 4 or 5.
4 or 5. Yeah, I mean, the way you slice it, it will. Yeah. It's not great either.
Enoch, do you want to read some verses today?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, 5 of us. So
Okay, 5. Yeah.
everybody just read four verses, and I'll read the last 5. So, JT, you can go ahead and start. JT,
Okay.
Verena, then Enoch.
Okay.
Start at 32.
Yeah.
And they came to a place which was named Gethsemane, and he saith to his disciples, Sit you here while I shall pray. And he takes with him Peter and James and John, and began to be sore amazed, and to be very heavy, and said unto them, My soul is exceeding sorrowful unto death. Tarry you here and watch. And he went forward a little, and fell on the ground, and prayed that, if it were possible, the hour might pass from him.
He prayed, Abba, Father, you can do all things. Take away this cup of suffering, but do what you want, not what I want. Then Jesus went back to his followers and found them asleep. He said to Peter, Simon, are you sleeping? Couldn't you stay awake with me for 1 hour? Stay awake and pray for strength against temptation. The spirit wants to do what is right, but the body is weak. Again, Jesus went away and prayed the same thing.
And again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were very heavy, and they did not know what to answer him. And he came the third time and said to them, Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? It is enough. The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. And immediately, while he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a crowd with swords and clubs, from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders.
Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, The one I will kiss is the man. Seize him and lead him away under guard. And when he came, he went up to him at once and said, Rabbi. And he kissed him. And they laid hands on him and seized him. But one of those who stood by drew his sword and cut the servant of the high priest, and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. And Jesus said to them, Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to capture me?
Every day I was with you, teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me. But the scripture must be fulfilled. Then everyone deserted him and fled. The young man, wearing nothing but a linen garment, was following Jesus. When they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind. All right. Fun stuff. Yeah, we are talking about Jesus praying at the Garden of Gethsemane, and then Jesus being arrested by the Roman soldiers and pharaohs and everybody. So, before we start, a fun fact. Gethsemane actually translates to like oil press, or oil pressing. That's why in some places they refer to it as like the place of pressing. So they were on, the Mount of Olives. This is where the olives were pressed.
Oh, okay.
and olive oil. So there you go. Fun fact. That's the only fun fact I had time to look up today.
That's okay.
None of the rest of it is fun. So, verses 32 and 33, we see that they went to Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." And then he took with him Peter, James, and John. So my question is, why did Jesus not want all of his disciples to follow him? And why did he specifically call out Peter, James, and John to follow him and stand watch?
I don't know if I know the exact reason, but I mean, there seems to be a theme that these are the three kind of like closest to Jesus. Saw them the transfiguration, things like that. When the boy, I forget who it was, but someone was raised from the dead. They would,
Yeah.
things like that. But I don't know exactly how they became close. Like the three inner circle.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, Peter's like the rock in the church. He's probably like the one. But yeah, as far as why specifically those three are his inner circle, I can't. That deserves a deeper dive probably than we have time for. I don't really know the answer to that. But yeah, that's just his inner circle. He's bringing them with him to essentially teach a lesson to them, right? It's a learning moment. So he's bringing his, inner circle to teach this moment. That we'll see later on.
Yeah, I think.
Right, and also because like Peter, if you look later on in the book of Acts, right, he preaches the first sermon at Pentecost, right? He even goes to the Gentiles. So I think especially for Peter, because he's going to play such a pivotal role in the early church, that's why Jesus has him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
He's definitely like the bigger like continuation of the church through the Gentiles, and he's the rock,
Yeah, and then I feel like, I mean, with John, I mean, John's was, I mean, the last, as we're aware, one of the last surviving of the original 12, and I mean, he wrote the book of Revelation and other things that sort of point towards these future things, so that can play an important factor. And then James was, at least according to tradition, I think was, or maybe even in Acts, was the first like martyr of the Christian faith. So, for him at least, it may have just been an aspect of like, you get to have like, you're included to have this closest now because you're going to be one of the first to, I mean, die in my, I don't know, but maybe not.
Was Stephen the first martyr?
Or at least of the
Yeah.
disciples.
Oh,
At least of the
disciples.
disciples, yeah.
Oh,
Maybe I should clarify. Yeah, maybe at least of the disciples. I think Stephen was the first, yeah.
What about Judas?
Well, Judas is not.
Okay.
Yeah.
And John was the disciple that Jesus loved, obviously. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
he made sure we knew that.
Yeah.
Subtitle. No reason.
Hey,
Just
hey, no, when our pastor preached through John pretty recently, he was saying that a lot of that he said that was, he didn't use his name. It was like that was the one thing that he wanted to identify himself as, like not the disciple who did this or who did that, but the disciple that was loved by Christ,
Yeah.
because in reality that's all that we. So I choose to say that that's probably why he did that. Like, so let's give him a little credit.
Yeah, that's fair.
Now he did say he got there first, so I can't. He got to
some
the tomb
competition.
first, so we can't even know.
Didn't he ask who was gonna be greatest? Yeah.
Well,
I think they
all
did
the
that.
yeah.
All right, moving on. That was supposed to be like a 5-second answer. So.
Too bad.
Making great time.
Yeah, we'll make it through.
Yeah, 6:45 is looking good.
Yeah. So then in verse 34, we see Jesus say that his soul was overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. that's like pretty heavy stuff, right? Like, I mean, I heard Dustin say that like after every geometry assignment last semester, but no, this is like a very something heavy is going on because this is Jesus saying this. So why would Jesus say that his soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death? What is such the big burden that he has to carry looking forward?
He knows what's coming in Jerusalem. Just the death, the persecution, or the suffering he's going to go through.
And specifically, I mean, the suffering that he's gonna face with the wrath of God being poured
Yeah.
upon him for the sins of the people. I mean, that's the things that all the Romans are gonna do to him is awful. It's like, but that in comparison to what he took on the cross for us is
Yeah.
You know, that's sort of where it changes, you know, it's you know, because you read passages in Acts where the disciples, you know, talk about like, oh, like we were counted worthy to be persecuted for Christ, and that was something that we're glad, you know, it's not fun, it's not necessarily fun, but we're glad that, you know, it is for Christ. You know, and so to imagine that Christ was like, oh, I'm so scared to be like, it doesn't really you know, it doesn't really match up, at least in that regard, but it's
Yeah.
something much greater that he's like thinking about that we fortunately in Christ don't ever have to worry about dealing with.
JT, can you read 2 Corinthians 5:21?
For he had made him to be sin for us, who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him.
Yeah. So I mean, you guys already, or Dustin, like already kind of answered it, but Jesus says specifically that his soul is overwhelmed with sorrow, like
Mhm.
something's going to happen, like, you know, with his soul. And Jesus was dreading, like, not necessarily the physical horror of, you know, the crucifixion and like the lashes and everything, even though that's bad, but he was more dreading the spiritual horror of being like made sin on the cross, right, and bearing that, you know, that wrath of God,
Yeah.
right. So then he appoints his disciples to stay and keep watch. I'll skip that question. We answered that. So then in verse 35, Jesus says, or going a little further, he fell to the ground and prayed that if possible, the hour might pass from him. So my question, it might be kind of silly, but why does Jesus want this moment to pass from him? Like, doesn't he want to save us from our sins, right? He knows that's what's coming. So why would Jesus pray for this moment to pass from him?
Well, I mean, there was another way to do it that was easier, but didn't require like, you know, all the suffering that he had to go through. And that would be better for him. And then I mean, like, in verse, verse 38, like he says, like, you know, my spirit wants to do what is right, but my body is weak. So like, you know, there's still that temptation of like, I don't want to go through all this suffering. But I know that like I need to do what the Father will. So he like even then he's like not even like complaining to the Father or anything like that. He's just like, if this is your will, like, can you take this away? It's not just like, God, why do you have to make me do this? Like, you know, like there's the heart posture is there of like, you know, if it is your will and there's an easier way, then like, let's do that. But otherwise I'm willing to do it. So.
Yeah, I think another thing to mention here is just, I mean, to emphasize again the difference between Jesus's godness and Jesus's humanity, because that's, I mean, a lot of, I mean, yeah, I mean, Jesus is experiencing a lot of weakness in his human flesh, and it's that, like, in that moment where he's, because, I mean, we do understand that Christ, as God, like, understood all of this and what he had to do, and that this would come to pass, but, there was, a bit of that he gave up as he came to be in the form of a human and took on a lot of human weakness. And so, I mean, in that position, like that's still scary to, it's a lot to take on. So, and it's very interesting. I think this is a good section really to think a lot about Jesus and his humanity versus Jesus as God. It's trying to understand how to parse all that out, but
Yeah, I mean, I think it just shows that Jesus is, well, he is a willing participant in this, but only just, right? Only because he has to be, right? He doesn't want to do this. Like, he doesn't want to go through this. So he's kind of like asking, is there another way? Even though he knows the answer, right? But it's just asking, like, is there another way that this could happen?
yeah, it's kind of like what Bray had said. It's like, I mean, this is where the spirit is, I mean, more than willing to do so, but it's the body dwelling in that's weak. And Christ never sinned, but he still faced the temptation of that, still struggled with that. So there's a very great desire to be like, I don't want to do that, but yeah.
We'll probably revisit that point in a couple verses. Right. So then in verse 36, first I want to mention that he refers to God as Abba, which is, the familiar term for like father, right? So first of all, it shows that Jesus thinks that God is a dancing queen, right?
No.
No.
This is not the group, no, not the music group. This is
Shoot, I
This-
got it.
you gotta
My,
see it.
my notes are all.
Maybe a little bit for time limit.
Yeah.
This is the Hebrew.
Crap their ass.
I was Hebrew, right? It's the Hebrew word.
Aramaic.
Aramaic. Okay, Aramaic word. Okay.
Yes, and this is the only time it's used in any of the Gospels, like one of 3 times it's used in the New Testament. In general, and I think I want to say both other times are in reference to Jesus also praying. I could be wrong. I have the verses there. Romans 8:15 and Galatians 4:6. I could be wrong about
No, you
but
it might no, I definitely know those references. My thing was talking about it says for on Abbas, you know that on Matthew 6:9. I don't see it doesn't mention that word in there, but maybe it's translated from. No, I'm just seeing where. So you were just saying it only appears a certain amount of times, but my study Bible had said like on reference to this word, see note on this verse, but it's not in that verse, so it seems like because it may have just translated Abba there as, or maybe the word that would have been similar to Abba was just translated Father here, but since he says Abba and uses 2 different words here, it sort of leaves both. Or I don't know.
from my research, it was the only one of only 3 times it was used in the New Testament.
Yeah.
So there might be some technicalities there with like quoting versus just writing down it the like Roman or Greek language, but I don't know.
It's interesting though. It's still like such a word, I feel like that sticks out a lot, when you read.
Yeah, it's in italics.
Yeah, well,
But yes.
not mine at least. It's not in italics. I mean, it's just, yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting. But mine's not. So.
I wouldn't say that.
Anyway,
No, but yeah, it just shows Jesus's familiarity with Jesus or with God, and in the other times in the New Testament where it uses that word, we use it as like we cry out, Abba, Father.
Mhm.
It's 8:15, which shows our familiarity with Jesus after we're adopted some sonship with him.
Yeah, like there's just a recognition of like I am actually like, in sonship with you, like with this, yeah, rather than like sort of an arbitrary like, oh yeah, he's above us, but not because when Jesus was referring to God as the Father, like the Jews had an issue with that. They're like, that's not
Yeah.
how can you claim for him to be your father in the familial sense, like
And from my research, it's more than just like father. It's more like a just relaxed term for father, kind of
Abba
like
is?
from
Or
in this some sense. Well, the commentary I read said that it translated more to like daddy,
Oh, so it's Daddy
Instead of
God.
that.
yeah.
but
I knew they had something.
I don't know about that one.
I mean, my Bible also says that like Abba is a name that a Jewish child would call his father.
Yeah. Okay, that's a better.
Yeah, like
that's
children,
better.
our children crying, to our father,
Yeah, which is how it's used here. Jesus is literally crying out to his father, right? And he asks, uh, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will. So he's basically begging, like a child, to their father, don't make me do this. Please don't make me do this. Is there any other way? But I'll do it if I have to, since it's your will. Right? So specifically, Jesus asks God, like, take this cup from me. And we might have already touched on this a little bit, but why does Jesus use that imagery of the cup? And I have some verses that we feel like you want to read them. Let's go ahead and read the let's go ahead and read the verses before Dustin starts reading his
Are
verses.
some of your verses from Jeremiah 25?
One of them is.
Aha.
Verena, can you read Psalms 75:8? Then Enoch. You're there, can you read Isaiah 51:17?
Yep.
Awesome. And then Dustin, you can, just read whatever you want from there.
No. Give me a specific verse because it's a long section.
25:15.
25:15. Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, so these are Psalm 79.
75:8.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense. I can't, this sounds right. Okay. All right, so Psalm 75:8. The Lord holds a cup of anger in his hand. It is full of wine mixed with spices. He pours it out even to the last drop, and the wicked will drink it all.
Isaiah 51:17. Wake yourself, stand up, O Jerusalem. You who have drunk from the hand of the Lord the cup of his wrath, who have drunk to the dregs the bowl, the cup of staggering.
Dustin.
Okay, Jeremiah 25:15. Thus the Lord, the God of Israel, said to me, take from my hand this cup of the wine of wrath, and make all the nations to whom I send you drink it.
Yeah, so as we can see, God is using like a cup or a chalice of some sort to symbolize God's wrath and judgment. We see that throughout the Old Testament. And Jesus is going to become an enemy of God on that cross, and he will be forced to, drink this cup, right? He'll be forced to bear the full brunt of the wrath and judgment of God. So my question is, that's what symbolism of the cup in the Old Testament is, right? What does drinking from the cup symbolize, in this New Testament? Where have we seen that?
Lord Supper.
Yeah. Anybody care to expand on that?
Well, so the cup is full represents Christ's blood. Said that was poured out for us.
Yeah.
So we read last week.
Yes.
So we drink from the cup, we find life.
Yes.
Yeah.
So specifically in Matthew 14, verses 23 through 24, it says, then he, Jesus, took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, and they all drank from it. This this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many, he said. So, the Old Testament, drinking from the cup is like the wrath of God and judgment. But then with Jesus and the new covenant, drinking from the cup, that's the new covenant we have in Jesus, right? So there's some important symbolism there.
Yep.
That's cool. I never made that connection.
Neither had I until like noon. But yeah, I think it's cool. I had heard, drinking from like the cup of God, or like I had heard that before, but I never really made the connection that was, a recurring symbolism that we see. So, and then it mentions it again in Revelation, but we're not going there.
Yeah, that's for another day.
No.
That would be very interesting study.
No, next semester we're doing an Old Testament book, so or books, so Revelation's out of consideration for this next year, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's got a lot of Old Testament language.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true. Wrath of God.
It does. Hey, the wrath of God is still a New Testament reality as well.
All right, so moving on. So this is, I don't really have this in the form of a question, but just an important note that I kind of read about and saw. So Jesus in this verse asks God if there's any other way to save humanity other than his suffering, and he receives no answer. And therefore, we can use this to conclude that this is the only way that we can be saved. This is the only way of salvation, right? If there was some other way for us to be saved and for Jesus not to die on the cross and bear the weight of our sins, probably would have done it, right?
Right.
It's at least the easiest way, right? And it's the only way.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
just some more evidence for that. If Jesus telling you isn't enough, there you go.
Yeah, especially just making that clear for a lot of times when people are like, why couldn't God have just forgiven us, just let it go, we say we're sorry, and then he couldn't have like that he couldn't have done that, because if God is a righteous judge, and so that requires just punishment for sins like against him, so that just can't be ignored. You would be upset if someone committed some terrible crime and the judge was like, yeah, you seem nice, I'll let it go, I forgive you, go ahead. No, it needs to be taken care of.
What's the word of God?
Yeah, you want to read it?
Cats aren't in the Bible.
Is there any cats in the Bible? I'm not
Nope.
sure.
No,
Darn.
they're not. It's a big cat.
It's a line.
Oh yeah, there's lions, yeah.
She's not a lion. She wishes.
For those watching, sorry, you saw the cat in the last week's video. If you watched that,
Oh.
the cat is off the screen right now, distracting attention. So we will get back to the study now.
Let's see, where was I? I'll go ahead and skip this. No, I won't skip this question. So Jesus ends his prayer by saying, "Yet not what I will, but what you will." Right? And I saw that there was some. Okay, so full disclosure, I haven't really seen this sentiment too much, but a commentary that I read today discussed that many people use this as an argument that this is like a faithless prayer, like you have no faith in God to answer your prayers if you end your prayer like this. And I don't know, I think that's an interesting thing to think about. Or it's a prayer that lacks faith in God. I don't know if we want to kind of discuss that.
I think that is very erroneous.
Yeah.
Because that's, I mean, first of all, if anyone,
Okay, you got started.
if anyone is to instruct us what faithful prayer looks like, it's Christ.
Yeah.
Not, it's not us. Second of all, to have faith in God means that you trust him to do the right thing, right? And that's exactly what Christ is doing. He's saying, I mean, even though Christ is God himself, right? He still is, and he still submits to the Father, right? And is because this is what the Father has orchestrated and put together, Not that Christ wasn't a part of it, but they sort of have their different roles. And so he's saying, this is not what I will to do, but it's your will be done. Like that's a great amount of faith to do that, right? If we say, God, I pray you do this and do that, and because it's the right thing to do, like that's not putting faith in God, that's putting faith in ourselves, like because we think we know that this is what should be done, and so we're just going to declare it to God that he should do it. But that's not, yeah.
I can't remember. Jason, were you there at the like healing event?
No,
for
but
Doubt?
I've
Okay.
heard.
Okay. Because like at that Room for Doubt event, the people who were there, they were like, people can get, like not saying that God can't heal people, but they were like, we're going to declare that this person is healed. So there was like a person there that had like minor back pain, and they were like, we are declaring that you are going to be healed immediately. And I remember them specifically saying, like, do not say, like, if it be your will, God, because that is not faith. So they were like, you have to declare it, and you have to say, like, God heal this person, or like, you are healed. And I was just
Take
like,
the reins.
yeah, exactly. And I was just
Show
like,
who's boss.
yeah, so it's like, I mean, it's the same sentiment as like, what Dustin was saying, but like there are people who like think that. And we saw that at the little really weird faith healing thing.
Yeah, that's probably the circle that, I'm not surprised.
It's
I can see that in.
Yeah, it's just it's not wrong. It's like we're very much encouraged to ask for things, that
Mhm.
we pray and ask for the Lord to provide and for this and that, right? But we ultimately in that with recognizing that, it's him that knows what's right, what's good to do, and not us. And so we say, I pray that you might do this, Lord, or heal this person, or have this go this way or this, and that would be wonderful. But ultimately, Lord, may you direct, may your will be done, and that's what faith should call us to do. We should be focused on him, and that he'll carry it out and trust in him.
Yeah. I almost think that saying, hey God, do this, shows a complete lack of faith
Yeah.
in God. Like God's got you exactly where he wants you to be. So you just trust in his will, let his will be done.
Yeah. Because if you say that and it's not like you don't leave it up to his will, and then it doesn't happen, you're like, well, you lost your chance. I told you to do this and you didn't do it. So come on, man. But yeah.
Alright, moving on. All right. Actually, I'll pause now. Are there any other comments or questions on those first 5 verses there before we move on? I think we covered them pretty in depth. Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
Meeting.
I don't know if Elon used to leave soon.
Yeah, 6:45.
Yeah, there's a chat. I need to see what. Oh.
You have to go now.
Bye, Enoch.
Bye, guys. Yeah, see you next
See
week.
ya.
Yeah.
Disembodied hands.
Cool. So then Jesus finishes praying, and in verse 37, he returns to his disciples and finds them sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
That would be me.
I can't do anything. Yeah, it's like, when you're little and you're at a sleepover at your friend's house, you're like playing video games on the couch and you look over and they're asleep, and it's like, oh, I guess the fun's gone for tonight. Okay.
Sleep is fun.
I completely agree. Sleep is a good time.
That's my favorite. All right. Just me.
No, I agree, so I don't think sleep is.
All right. Anyways, so then Jesus calls Peter Simon,
Mhm.
and I think this is kind of like, you know, when you get in trouble and your parents just use like your full name, like, I don't know, like Dustin. What's your middle name?
William.
Dustin William Newland.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're in trouble. So, but yeah, no, seriously, and he calls Peter Simon here because Peter is like, you know, the rock, the future of the church. Like he'll bring word like to the Gentile and like continue on in that way. This isn't Peter that is ignoring like falling short of the orders of God. This is Simon. This is very much the human Simon, right? Yeah. I just thought that was an important.
Well, he also isn't Peter or Cephas the name that he he gives to him, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's sort of like, yeah, here's
Oh, yeah.
your name. Like this is, you know, you go by Simon, but there was another Simon. Was there another Simon? Or was that another something else?
I think.
I thought
There-
there were two Johns. Are you talking about like within the disciples?
No, it's not
or-
two. I don't think there's two Johns. There's two Judases.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
two Judases.
Anyway, it's not important.
I wouldn't be surprised.
There's the sorcerer.
Yeah, there's Simon.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, but Simon, he said to Peter, "Are you asleep? Couldn't you keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." Right? So Jesus says, like, instead of falling into this temptation, instead of falling into, you know, the desires of the flesh, right? We need to, what are the exact words? Watch and pray so that you don't do that. So when are we going to see Peter fall into temptation?
Page of my Bible.
Did you, are you looking at that?
Huh?
Are you looking?
Oh, sorry.
I don't think we can legally answer that question, Jason.
We
Well,
can't,
you-
but we can look back when Jesus tells him.
Yeah, I
that
was
he'll
gonna
fall
say,
short.
I was gonna say. why?
So.
I
it's
was looking at
fine.
Matthew. Is that okay?
No.
Darn. Yeah, no, he says. Yeah, the page before.
Okay, that's.
Or actually, no, it's on the same page for me.
Jesus says, "You're gonna deny me," and then Peter's like, "No, I'm not gonna do that." And then, guess what happens?
Yeah. Falls into the temptation of the flesh, right? So this is like, you know, a spiritual battle that we all kind of face, right? We know we're gonna fall short. We know we're gonna do these things, these sins, whatever they may be, and even though in the morning we tell ourselves, "All right, not gonna do these things, not gonna do this or that," we end up doing it anyways, right? And oftentimes, like the spiritual battle is won or lost before like the crisis comes, right? Before we get faced with that temptation, we need to watch and pray, right? Just as Peter didn't, right? And then we see him fall short later on, right? Even though he knew it was coming.
Yeah.
Right. Then any more thoughts or questions on that little paragraph? Those, I guess it's only 2 verses. I think the rest kind of quicken this little section here. So before we steam ahead, I just want to. All right. So then in verse 39, it says that once more he went away and prayed the same thing. Right. So my question is, why would Jesus just repeat the same prayer? Right? God heard him the first time. Right? So isn't it like a waste of time?
Wants to ask, seek,
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely trying to set an example here, but also, I mean, that's time. I think that's, I mean, the one thing that's giving him solace is like continuing to bring it to the Father and just ask him again and again, you know. That's a fine thing to do. Like we should feel comfortable bringing up the same things again, you know. We should. I think for as an application for our own lives, like we shouldn't be afraid of like, oh, sorry, God, I've come here again the same thing. You know, I'm sorry. Can you help me? Like, I mean, he still wants to listen. Still wants to. So cares like that. We're, you know, it's not like you already told me. Stop telling me. Like he. I mean, because that's prayer is. I mean, it really does things, and I think especially when you pray, I think that helps you a lot just to be able to conversate, you know, to be able to say these things and to know that the Lord is listening. So, but anyway,
Yeah. Always good to pray, even if we've already asked. Be persistent. And then, unfortunately, when Jesus came back, he found them sleeping again. Right? And at this point, it's just kind of embarrassing.
Yeah.
But then he returns a third time and he sees them sleeping again. Right? And let's see. Oh, it says, I guess after the second time, they did not know what to say to him. Right? So we find ourselves in these situations quite a bit. I think like some sort of sin is more so like a continual sin. Like we do it repeatedly over and over again, even though we know whatever we're doing is not good, right? It's sin. But for whatever reason, we still persist in doing it, right? And we really don't have any answers, much like the disciples here, right? We have nothing to say, God, because we know we just straight up fallen short, and we had no excuses, right? Not that there normally are any good excuses, but it's really evident in these situations that we should have done better and known better, right? So the only solution, Jesus actually gives us a solution on how to, begin to fix some of these problems in verse 38, right? He says to watch and pray so that you do not fall into these temptations, right? Because the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, right? If we don't watch and pray, our flesh is weak, it will always fail us, right? We cannot get over these like continual sins without watching and praying and relying on the spirit, right? On the Lord to give us strength to make it through those times, right? Still sleeping and resting enough. The hour has come. Look, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer. I don't really have anything for like the rest of like verse 42 or 41. So that was kind of like a little heavier section. I just moved through. So are there any other comments on that little paragraph there?
yeah, I think I feel like you should say it. It's, I mean, the time for sleeping, like the time for this is it's done because my betrayer is at hand. Like he's coming. So let's go and greet them basically, or be present, like follow me this way. So I just think it's a statement. We're, you can't stay awake, but it's time anyways.
Then I actually do not have anything. I'll read through it again, but I don't have any questions or comments for verses 43 through 46 or 7. It's just very much a recounting of events, right? So just as he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared. With him was a crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, Rabbi, and kissed him. The man sees Jesus and arrested him. Then one of those standing near drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. We'll talk about the ear in a second. But any I don't know, nuggets of information that anybody's feeling pressed to comment on those 4 persons or so.
Oh, that's it. Anyway. Sorry. I just think, I mean, it's just interesting. I think we've kind of mentioned this before, but I mean, the fact that Judas needs to give them a sign and go up and like to point out Jesus to them specifically, you know, like it's not like everyone knew exactly, like they heard of him and they were sort of upset at what he's doing, but not everyone's actually seen him. And another thing is, you know, in Isaiah 53, it says, this is verse 52, it says, For he grew up before him like a young plant, like a root out of dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should desire him. That's like a passage that's pointing, looking forward to Christ. So like, I think it's also just emphasizing that fact that like, I mean, otherwise there's nothing necessarily that, you know, physically about Christ himself and his humanity that's like to be noted of or thought of, you know. It's not trying, I mean, other than when he was transfigured, there's nothing there that's like, oh, it's, you know, this is the guy, it must be, he's the most handsome of all these dudes, you know. It's none of that, like,
Sorry. Or he's like like, you know, King Saul, who's like a head taller than like everybody else. So it's like, okay, that's the king.
Right.
He's really tall. So
yeah, there's like nothing, you have to have someone point out who he is to others, like to know that that's Jesus, like
Just to do.
yeah, you just yeah, at least yeah, outwardly as a human, he just looked like another guy. Obviously he wasn't just another guy, but that's what he looked like. So, and I think that's just part of his humiliation, right? I mean, he's king of all kings and greatest of all, but it doesn't look like anything. He didn't make himself look like anything special while he was here. So,
Stop hurting.
I just moved my legs and she complained.
Yeah. It's just another dude.
yep.
Religious leaders were pretty cowardly, just sending other people that obviously didn't know really who Jesus was to do their dirty work in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Whose turn is it to read? The background to you.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Can you read Luke 22? Wait, no. Read. When I get lost, there's 2 pages.
Trust me.
Read John 18:10.
Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it, and smote the high priest's servant, and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus.
That's just a cross reference, just you know, in Mark it doesn't identify the swordsman, but it's Peter, of course.
Same attention break, huh?
I don't know. This is just a side comment. I find it weird that he's just traveling around with a sword. I don't know how common that was.
That Peter's traveling around with a sword?
Yeah.
Or, I think, well, actually, hold on. Luke 22. Actually, you're going to mention this passage?
No, I have no idea.
Okay.
I
Okay.
did not look at this at all.
So he says,
Oh,
seduce
wait.
to some, or are you?
38, verse 38.
Yeah, look, here are 2 swords. It's, yeah,
Oh.
so they do have,
Just found 2 swords. Okay.
well, he says,
Oh, look.
well, he says, but now let the one who has a money bag take it, and likewise a knapsack, who has no sword, sell his cloak and buy one. So he's like, which I didn't get into this passage as much, last week, but it's kind of like there during the upper room stuff. But it is kind of interesting. He's sort of like instructing them to or like I don't know. It's interesting that my I don't know if it's worth getting into right now. My Sunday Bible has a whole big section of what he means by that because it does seem odd for him to be. But there is some precedent that they do have swords present with them for some cause. So in any case, yeah.
Yeah, I just found that, I just thought that was interesting. So we see that Peter, saw Jesus was in trouble, so he resorted to violence, right? So I think that's very a natural response, kind of. How do we see this, either today or like throughout history, right? How does it reflect in like the church and our defense for Christ?
So wait, you're talking US specifically about like in church history
Yeah,
or this happened? Well, I mean like crusades. Like,
yeah, that's the big one, right? Historically speaking.
can't remember other
Yeah, I mean, I think probably just in general when it came to like, I mean, being having to defend certain like positions on things, like oftentimes I think very quick to be like, well, that's you know what, we're just very apt to no that it can't be that like where I'm not gonna let like this is clearly right, not really. I mean, just being very defensive and not obviously that doesn't actually involve a weapon, but that's that you know, the anger, there's an anger there that's instead of listening, it just turns into like me lashing out for stuff. So
I have a couple more examples. Constantine, when he was emperor, there was like some heresy that popped up, and like after one of the councils, they were like, "This isn't true," and then after that, Constantine like made it a law that like people who believe this should be put in prison. I can't remember. It was like put to death or something like that. I can't remember. And then also after the Reformation, when the Anabaptists started popping up, the Anabaptists were persecuted a lot and put to death because of their beliefs. So there's a lot of times in the Bible or times in history where trying to keep the purity of the gospel.
and also like towards the beginning of the Reformation, like when what was his name, William Tyndale, the guy was trying to translate the Bible to English, like got burnt, like because they're like, no, you can't do that, and like that's not how we should respond to that at all. Catholic Church was not doing great.
Yeah, I was just gonna say like the Catholic Church in general, sometimes just a lot of their like missionaries that they sent out to other countries and establishing churches were very what's the word? Not integrating, but like informing, I guess. Stripping away like all the beliefs and everything from the native people and just forcibly just oppressing them right into their beliefs. You can see that a lot. And just in general, the church for certain time periods and actions have not reflected Christ. What he does, we more reflect Peter sometimes, right? And lash out and don't make the best decisions when we choose to defend Christ or defend our positions. Right?
But it's very natural. I mean, like if you think of like a kid, when if you take a toy away from them, what they want, they'll just like start smacking. Yeah, exactly. So it's natural tendency for sure to just lash out.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's important to recognize, right? So I think specifically it's kind of interesting that Peter cuts off this person's ear, right? So Jesus has talked about ears quite a bit. Now, this is more so me kind of just rambling. I think that there's some symbolism here. You could take some, objections to precisely what I say based off of where you stand and like, Calvinism or predestination. Or
I object to that.
Just bear with me.
No, I'll hear it. No, it's fine.
So Peter like cuts off this person's ear, and we see Jesus throughout the gospel saying like, if people have like eyes to see and ears to hear, like they know what I'm saying, they understand this message, right? And Peter, in his violence in defending Christ, cuts off these people's ears, right? So they can't hear, right? And we can see that sometimes, people from the church are like extremely hateful or bigoted towards other people that aren't Christians or don't believe what they believe, and those people are just turned off from Christianity, right? If you have conversations with people, you'll meet a lot of people that, oh yeah, my parents are Christian and like they kick me out of the house or whatever, and therefore I just don't mess with Christianity at all. So that it can lead to people feeling excluded from the gospel, right? In some way. But however, bring it back around, because the elect, Jesus, does, give them back the ears to hear, right? So, yeah, I don't know. I just think that's just a kind of parallel that I kind of thought of. That I think is interesting to think about.
Yeah, and it's not in the Mark passage what Jesus does.
Oh yeah, I meant to
restore Malchus.
He doesn't heal him. Well, he does heal him, but Mark doesn't mention it.
Yeah.
He mentions it in
Is it mentioned in Luke or is it John?
Luke 22:50. I meant to have us read that though, but
Do you think Peter was like going for his head and like you just dodged and that's why he got all those ears?
That's what
probably.
Honestly, that could be. I do think there could still be sort of a.
I don't know. It's hard to hit someone with a sword, like surprisingly. Like as somebody who did fencing, you'd be surprised at the amount of people that just go like this and just miss the head.
Yeah.
Right. Like Peter's not a swordsman.
Yeah, especially I was say. I mean, I feel like especially to hit the ear. Well, I guess I don't know exactly how and what degree the ear was cut off. I guess a lot of times we sort of
elephant ear.
and I feel like sometimes we sort of picture like the whole thing, but it could just be like, I mean, just like a portion. He did miss, but then like it's so I don't know. I was just thinking like sometimes it might picture it dramatically of like the whole ear, but like I don't know. Anyway, it's not important. But I do think that's interesting, and I think that's always an important note to bring up is that a lot of people will say why, what stops you from becoming a Christian, and I think they're going to run into people that who profess to be Christian that have hurt them in their lives, which I mean I know people even in the past that I have probably hurt because of ways that I believed or things that I had said. Done this and that, so I'm not exempt from that at all. But that's why it's just very important to pray that we can have a good witness and that Christ will work in that person's heart to not just look to be able to that I mean of course that people would be provided that can show them I mean what Christ should look like, but also just to point them to the word and to see the most pure version of the Lord, right? Because ultimately you come to the question of like, it's not, you should determine the faith, I mean, based on the person who taught it, and that's Christ, and we see him, I mean, doing nothing but good in the scriptures. And I mean, he's still alive, right? And so seeing him as the perfect, that will not bring hurt to us, that is ultimately good. It's just, it's a subject that, I mean, just think a lot about it. You don't want to necessarily be like, well, just ignore all the bad people and just think about Christ. But I mean, because it's hard to do for people. Be a good witness. You want to be a good witness.
Yeah, don't attack them with a sword.
Yeah.
Maybe a hug.
Give them a big bear hug. Yeah.
I mean, some people might equate that with being attacked by swords.
You prefer the sword?
Sword.
We're gonna give a JT a big hug after this.
Yes.
Anyway, sorry.
Okay, looking at time. What do I want to mention?
Don't have too much.
Well, I mean, you do have an interesting passage about the dude running naked.
Yeah.
so-
Debating how much
Yeah, tell us what's the significance of this,
You had
Jason.
no fun facts about.
Wait, what about, we still have a couple
Yeah, we
verses
still have a
here,
couple verses
guys.
to go. I'm debating how
That's
much
what we're
we want to
saying.
discuss them.
Yeah,
No, not 51, 52. We still have 48 through 50. Are you guys just gonna
Yeah.
remember those?
well, I mean, he was debating whether, like, what parts.
I'm
to
looking
cut.
at how much. We're still gonna read them.
Okay, I'm
Jeez.
sorry, guys.
Am I leading a rebellion, said Jesus, that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I was with you teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me. Why didn't the teachers of the law arrest Jesus when he was just talking to the temple courts? Why are they choosing this, in the middle of the night in a garden to arrest him?
Because they know that Jesus didn't do anything wrong. People would write.
Yeah, they just couldn't do it in any other time because there would be sort of that right amongst the people there, but they had to do it, at night and this remote location, and bring all these people there that were like, let's get this guy, And then they can sort of explain to the people, later as you're coming in, like, oh yeah, here's why we took him, and we'll figure it out, the way.
Ironically enough, they were afraid of making Jesus a martyr, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he is the court of public opinion at the moment, right? You arrest someone in broad daylight, that somebody as well like as Jesus, they would not be supporting his crucifixion, right? So they needed to do it in the middle of the night in a garden, specifically on a night when a lot of the Jewish people would be, at home, having, their Passover dinner. Right? So no one would see it. Then I have a question for verse 49. Why did Jesus go so easily with the guards? But he said that the scriptures must be fulfilled, right? So then in verse 50 it says, then everyone deserted him and fled. So Verena, can you read Mark 14:27?
Then Jesus told the followers, you all will stumble in your faith, because it is written in the scriptures, I will kill the shepherd and the sheep will scatter.
Scriptures were fulfilled. Right, Jesus is arrested and the disciples scattered. Right? So then we get to Dustin's favorite part, the naked
That's why I decided to go on Bible study.
Yeah.
All right. So a young man wearing nothing but a linen garment was following Jesus when they seized him. He fled naked, leaving his garment behind. So, do you two have any thoughts on that verse?
You're excluding
I have
Dustin.
thoughts.
No, because I told him earlier in the day that I have thoughts on this.
I'm leading the study. I want to say what I think before you give an answer. But any thoughts on this?
I have no thoughts.
Okay.
I feel like it's just, I'm sure there's some sort of significance, but at least here, it just seems like this is a strange thing that happened during this time. So Mark was just like, I remember that happening.
Well, Mark.
Wait.
Yeah.
No. I was just saying. Mark wrote this gospel later. Mark was one of the disciples.
Okay,
so
well, one of the eyewitnesses told him about this.
But
Maybe this was one of the disciples. I don't know.
Any thoughts, JT?
I mean, I've heard people with thoughts. I don't really have personal thoughts about this.
But it's in the Bible.
It says, I know.
You have to have an opinion.
I mean, yeah.
No, it's fine.
Yeah. I mean, people wanted to forsake Jesus so much that they even left their clothes behind.
So I could not find like a consensus answer for this. There's no solid reasoning. Some debate like how symbolic it is or whatnot. I found like two prevailing theories that have some backing. One a little more than others. But the first one is that Mark was actually there, and Mark is the naked man.
I've heard that.
Um,
Oh no.
I'm not sure about this one.
that wasn't.
Just so they're like,
Well, that's. I literally
It's basically
I
something
literally
Jesus
had never
said.
thought of. I literally had never thought about that, but my study Bible just mentioned it here, and so
Oh, really?
as I was saying what I was saying about Mark earlier, I was reading that, and I was like, oh wait, maybe I should.
so you shouldn't have corrected me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just. I was just saying he wasn't like he wasn't like, oh, that was a weird thing that happened because like he wasn't one of the disciples there.
He was
that,
like, well, he was
necessarily
like, this
saw.
was a weird thing that happened to me.
Yeah, it could
Yeah.
be,
Yeah, that the main kind of evidence that I've seen for this is that nobody would have told Mark this, everybody else had fled. And also it's like his way of putting like, I don't know, his signature like in the book. I'm not sure about that. You can see things from a distance and recount events that way. And he doesn't mention himself by name. There is some more evidence as to why it might be Mark.
Yeah,
Later
I've
on.
definitely heard that. I
Later.
like how it says, followed him a certain young man. Just like,
Yeah,
a
that's
certain
smart.
young fellow out there.
They also
We should
like
have a name.
in Acts, I think it's mentioned that they meet at like Mark's mother's house or something. Some people think that where they have the Last Supper, that's like Mark's house or his family's house. I'm not sure about the evidence there,
Yeah, that supports that.
but I don't know. It's one theory. And then the other one is, it's important to mention that these linen cloths were used, for beds and also in burials, right? So this is like the very symbolic kind of answer that I was talking about. So other people believe that this young man is the same man mentioned in Mark 16:5, which is looking ahead. And that's because and that young man is the one who is in the white robe in the tomb of Jesus and tells Mary, like, hey, don't be alarmed. You're looking for Jesus and he's not here. Right? And the evidence behind why people think this might be the same person is because they're both described with the same word, niskos. And it's the only time that Mark uses those words in his gospel. That would be kind of symbolic because he's the last person to be with Jesus when he's alive, and he's the first one to see him, or first one present, when he's risen. And kind of tie a nice little bow on it. I'm not sure. Also, that evidence is also a little shaky for me.
Yeah, 'cause
personally.
for me, I mean, it seems like that's an angel. That's pretty
Yeah, that
clear.
is, yeah. So, I don't know, other than that, those are really the only things I could find, so.
So I have another set of thoughts here. Okay. So I think the Mark one is interesting to me, but I think also a reason why this story might be mentioned, I think, is just to give sort of another picture as to what's taking place here. Because it's mentioned this young man has like nothing but a linen cloth around his body, right? He he doesn't really have much on except this linen cloth, right? Which isn't really much at all. But yet, whenever the time comes and like they seize him, like that linen cloth is gone, and then he runs. And so I've also heard, and I it's
Oh wait, there is
interesting,
another theory. Might be
might be getting it, which
like
is
the rich man.
no.
Okay.
No, but that this is representative of this linen cloth, you know, other than probably being an event that actually did happen, but also is symbolic to say the disciples were basically, you know, with Jesus, and they sort of had this veneer of confidence about them. You know, they like, we're going to stay with you and we're going to hold fast to you, and but really we can see that they fled so fast after all this happened that it was very thin. It really didn't have any substance to it. And it's sort of a similar thing, I feel like, with this linen cloth that covered him, that immediately when the moment comes, it comes off, right? And they're naked and bare, like they're fleeing, and that any sign of confidence or the faith they had in that moment just disappeared. So I don't know, I feel like it can kind of be a picture of that as well. Again, not saying it didn't actually happen, but maybe that's a reason why, just to give another.
Yeah, I
Like-
thought, maybe there is something about like, I was thinking back about that, the story of the rich young man that wants to follow Jesus, and Jesus says, you must give up everything, right? That's what you need to do, follow me. And just remind me of like, when all the disciples have fled, the only one like still following Jesus is this young man that has nothing, like just a linen cloth, right? He's the one following him the most in this sense. And then even that is, taken from him in his pursuit of following Christ. So I think think about.
Yeah, I mean, it's all, yeah, they're all interesting ideas there. I think it is kind of just a weird little story to be there. You know, it's another one of those things too. That's like, you know, if like people, if we were to believe that the Gospels are all just like made up stories that people were putting in, like there's really, you know, and they were sort of carefully crafting this thing together to paint the picture like that. That being there doesn't really make any logical, like you haven't advanced anything like that picture. Like, I mean, as we're discussing here, there's not really a clear something to take out of it. So like there's no goal there to be had other than like someone just wanting to be accurate to the events, no matter like if all the details fit. This like, this is just what happened, man. I want you to know.
I was just there.
Peter told me this is what happened, because Peter was a big source for Mark as well, so a lot of information came from, which is another thing when it doesn't say that Peter was the one that cut off his ear in Mark. It may be that, you know, Peter was like, there was one of the
Somebody did
disciples,
it.
someone did it.
I think Luke is the only gospel that mentions Peter by name though in that.
Yeah,
So I don't know.
in any case, so
Interesting.
And I think Mark is the only one that mentions that Jesus healed the man after his ear was cut off.
well, Mark didn't. I think it's Luke, right? Because Mark didn't say that he healed the man. Right.
Oh yeah, Luke healed the man. John mentions that Peter uses the sword. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, John's the only one that mentions Peter. Okay.
Okay.
Any other final thoughts on the passage? All right.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason. I'm gonna go ahead and stop this now.
Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.
subscribe.
Enjoy our sponsorship.
If we get one extra,
SJS at NordVPN.
if we get one extra subscriber, we'll feature the cat on the video next time. So stay tuned. Bruh.
What an epic way to end the video. Oh wait, it's still
It's still
going.
recording.
Bye bye.